has been doing things the same for 100+ years. There's kind of a mismatch here. But at the same time, this industry is starting to adopt technology in a lot of different ways, and AI is just one of those very dynamic components that can have a tremendous impact on a business.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we throw the term around artificial intelligence, AI, if I'm a layperson and I've just heard that term on CNBC and that it's being implemented in businesses in different places, what are the couple baseline things that I need to know to understand what's actually happening here?
Yeah. So when people talk about AI, they talk about it in a lot of different ways. And what we don't quite realize is how many times we use AI in our daily life. We use AI when we pull up maps, Google Maps on our phone. You're using AI when you talk to Alexa or Siri. You're using AI all the time. I mean, whether you're calling in someplace, you might hear some automated voice. Therefore, a lot of times that's AI. And so again, when I say a big umbrella, this encompasses our entire life, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah. So just kind of as a, to help me wrap my brain around this. So the idea that machine learning is happening here, like what does that, kind of explain how that happens? I know with Alanna and your product, we had talked about it that at the beginning, there were this many data points and it quickly was beginning to iterate into an infinite more on its own, which is like just mind-blowing for me to even think about that. But can you just explain that a little bit for those of us that don't quite get it?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times I like to talk about AI as, let's back up a few steps. We back up to these ideas that we these workflows that we create in our businesses, and it's like, okay, well, how do you create a workflow? Well, you look at a process and you break that process up into steps, and you do these steps over and over again. Now you got quote unquote workflow. And so, okay, what do you have to do to make that workflow happen over and over again? Well, next thing you know, you migrate to robotic process automation, RPA. And so now you might have heard RPA in the industry for a decade or so. And then what that does is it takes those processes and workflows and kind of automates those and makes those happen over and over again. Well, but that's a very static process. That process cannot change any at all. So the next evolution of RPA is AI. And so now you take these processes that happen over and over again, these robotic processes, and now you say, well, let's put a little bit of intelligence in there. If you see this, take this route. If you see that, take that route. And so put a little bit more thought into it like humans would do, but not humans just yet. So that's where you get into AI, where you say, hey, there's a decision to make, and there's a lot of logic points to consider. And it's that getting near human-like activities is really when you're talking about AI.
So that kind of tees up the conversation perfectly, talking about 4 myths about artificial intelligence and the ways that we might be able to use them to even help grow our business in the title space. So what you said leads to that kind of myth number 1, which in my mind, and we've talked through this a little bit, speaking about operational efficiency, there's a lot of people that think AI or AI powered virtual assistants are going to take the jobs of humans within a title company. So can we talk about that myth for a second? Are they going to take our jobs?
So it's funny. I was thinking about this today, and I said to myself, I'm like, how's best to really address this kind of myth? And I was like, okay, wind back. And I said, you know what? Voicemail is an example of, guess what? 30 years ago, we didn't have voicemail. We didn't even have voice recorders. Somebody picked up the phone and wrote down a message. And so think about now, I guess it was 30 years ago or so, you started getting, a tape recorder, leave a message. So next thing you know, that was a great example of taking a manual process and then a robot was doing that. And so now you kind of go, oh, well, now you actually get your voicemails read to you, or you get your voicemails transcribed. That's another evolution. And it's just, to me, it's thinking about what it was back then. You said, well, now a receptionist, they used to take messages. They used to be voicemail. And now, guess what? They don't do that as much as they did it once upon a time. And that is an idea of the same level of replacement that we are looking at here, which is, there's some things that could be done, by AI, And, we talked about it before, let's let humans do human things and robots do robot things. And so, yeah, and that's how I like to put it, to say, you know what, it's okay to let a AI or some kind of automation take over some of these things that are redundant and don't necessarily need a human to do it.
Yeah, so I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit throughout our time together, but it's kind of interesting as we're moving into the shifting market. Agency owners are looking at their bottom lines, right? They're looking at their top line expenses, their variable costs, their fixed costs, and they're trying to figure out ways to make sure to be safe and sustain through this shifting market. And so some of this, it sounds like, I mean, that's just kind of streamlining and improving a process. It's not replacing somebody, it's allowing that human to move on to other human activities and allowing that robot to do some of the robot activities, right?
Exactly. And that's, we think about it. I'm not sure about you, Sam, but for me, my email has not stopped growing year after year. and to process and go through that email is taking more and more of my time. And to think about the volumes of these interactions that are growing, if I had the opportunity, and everybody I've talked to, I said, hey, what if you had an assistant that could look at your email? What if you had an assistant that could do some of the things that are redundant, in your job, in your role? And every single person said, I would love an assistant. And I tell you what, Sam, I would love an assistant, but you know what? I can't afford an assistant. And so therefore, I'm still left doing it. But given the opportunity, you can see that if an assistant helped somebody like yourself or me or anybody in the audience, then they probably could find some time to do some other things that were more valuable activities than scrolling through my email and sifting out spam and whatnot.
Yeah. So when you talk about that, before we move on to myth number 2, before we talk, or when you talk about that, so if I'm a closer and I'm an escrow officer or whatever you call it, depending on where you are in the country, the idea that something can be responding to my clients and customers while I'm doing other things. Maybe I'm in a closing, maybe I'm working on a complex title issue, maybe I'm trying to live a life and have lunch with my significant other, like whatever. But the idea that like I can't work 24/7, something like Alanna and artificial intelligence doesn't have a shelf life per day, right? It's 24 hours a day. So what is that actually, if I'm a closer, I'm in a closing right now, Alanna or some form of artificial intelligence is sitting in my email. What does that actually look like? What is happening while I'm in that closing right now? Can you paint that picture for us?
Yeah, sure. So envision, again, if somebody was your assistant, envision what they would do, given limited abilities, limited ways that they could help you out. So they can do things like respond to some requests that came in for some data that might be in your backend production system. So when's my closing tomorrow? And some of the basic questions that, again, a lot of our audience get to hear over and over again. It's like, if those questions can be answered while you're doing something else, like you said, having a life, or in a closing, these are benefits to us all, so that we, the people on the other side of the transaction can go to their next step, and they're not basically waiting for you to come back from the beach or come back from lunch or get out of that closing or just come back from the weekend. You actually have that level of response that can happen in that timely manner that really elevates when we talk about customer success, when we talk about customer care in the transaction overall, that those activities can really boost up your overall experience with the title company.
Well, there's something to be said too. Like I kind of call it like the Amazon effect. It's affected so many things that we do in our daily life. And so as business people, it's affected how we engage with our customers. I can get a response from Amazon instantly on where my product or service is coming from, right? Like I know
Right.
where it is. I know if it got caught up in weather. I know when it's going to get there. I know when it's on my front door. And if I don't get that information served up to me, I can quickly open that, take a quick glance, and I know. And so communication has been one of those things that it's kind of the number one complaint of consumers in the real estate world, according to NAR in their study every 2 years. The last like 2 decades was, I didn't know what was going on. Right. I buy a dog bone on Amazon. I know everything from start to finish when it's on my front porch and where to go leave a review. I buy a house. I wasn't sure. So the idea that somebody can reach out on their time, even if it's after hours, when hopefully our people are home enjoying a life with their family or friends, is pretty awesome. And so leading into that, that really starts to transition into customer experience, right? And as we move into a shifting market, there's a couple things I feel like we need to focus on as title agents. One, our customer experience. People are more concerned about experience than even cost, statistically speaking. Why do you think something like Birchbox or BarkBox for dogs, or things like that have become so popular? They package something that's $10 and you pay $50 because it's an experience. It's a presentation. Right? So we're not even as cost conscious as we used to be consumer wise. So one is that experience, but two, really thinking about how do we double down on that relationship and create an actual relationship, right? So I know some people, leading into myth number 2, I know some people think, hey, I have a personal relationship with my clients and customers. That is the foundation of my business. It's a relationship business. We hear that all the time. Is AI going to take away from that relationship? Is it going to hurt that relationship in some way? Some people think that could happen. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great myth. And we hear this all the time. That's usually, I mean, there's a gut reaction, myth number 1, that gut reaction, I'm going to lose my job type thing. And that's not near the case. Myth number 2, we're talking about damaging that relationship that you've built in that human to human interaction, throughout the years. And, to me, when I look at that, and when I hear from the community as a whole, I hear that, and there's plenty of studies out there that are talking about, I've mentioned I'm getting more emails today than I ever have. What that means is I have less time to spend with my customers if I'm doing other things. And so even if we're not aware that sometimes those relationships can be strained based upon the load that we've been under for the past couple of years, we might have kind of a little bit of a adjustment that we need to do to say, are we still where we were a year, 2, 3 years ago in those customer relationships? And I think if we're honest, we realize that, we don't have 30 minutes to spend on the phone with some of those really important clients that we know are going to drive business our way. So to me, to offset the load, if you will, that's being, increased, whether it be through the work that's currently at the title company, or through those volumes that we've had for the past few years, or just the overall again, load of email and whatnot, to reduce that gives us more time and space to do the things that are really important. And that is to invest in those relationships. So it's to not only help those relationships get the information they need in those really quick moments, but also ability to connect with them in a more meaningful way with time and space.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're not going to build a long-time consumer relationship based on you responding with the amount that they need to bring to closing. Right. So like something as simple as like, where's my closing? How much do I bring? What day is it? That's not how you build relationships. Instead of responding to things like that, you could be dropping a handwritten note in the mail, thanking for the opportunity to be a part of their process. That's how you build an actual relationship. So I could see where actually, freeing up some of that time would allow you to refocus on the actual relationship, which is, the meaningful part.
Absolutely. I think, anytime you talk to anybody, they say, hey, how are you doing? The gut reaction is, I've been busy. And it's like, oh, okay. And if you really start to pull that apart, it's like, have you been busy with really meaningful things, or have you been busy with more kind of monotony type, hey, I'm doing these things over and over again. So what does busy mean? And it comes back, and you and I talked about, the Chili's robot.
Yeah.
Their Chili's is rolling out this AI robot that will basically take somebody to a table and bring them some water and even deliver their food. And you think about, oh, is that replacing people at Chili's? And when you really look at the business problem that's being solved, is that letting something that's mundane or kind of robotic be done by that robot, and let those servers and let those people that are interacting with you have more time to really help you out in, whatever that experience is that you're looking for at Chili's. So
yeah. And I mean, in our space, I wonder if every closer on this call were to think about how much time they've spent over the last 6 months responding to where the closing is, what to bring to closing, how much to bring to closing, either scheduling it or when it is, just those four simple, like those four things, the amount of time that I bet most closers and or their actual assistants or escrow assistants spend on those conversations would probably be like mortifying.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
yeah. So imagine those minutes per hour, those hours per day, hours and hours per week and month that are spent on those mundane things could be replaced in a way that not only, the other thing that I hate to say, and we kind of, I thought about this in that first myth, is like, typically speaking, we're humans. I make a mistake every once in a while, right? Like I put a decimal in a wrong place in a response, or maybe I transcribe something in an address, and when it comes to AI and the accuracy of the responses from somebody like Alanna, what does that look like accuracy wise versus human?
Yeah, so it's actually going into the production system to get information to respond. And what we find too is that, the information that might have got put in the production system might not have been exactly right. Like a name was misspelled. Now think about this, Sam, catching that name misspelled at the beginning of the process versus at the closing table. I mean, the time spent there, can be pretty, substantial. And so we've seen those corrections come through. Oh, you misspelled my name, and then it's like, oh, well, we'll get that over to your closer and get that corrected. So, again, coming back to communications and being able to, help, lead off some of those long-term issues. It's really good.
Yeah, I've sat in a closing before where I live in El Paso, Texas. There's some Hispanic surnames that are relatively complicated, especially if they're of Spanish descent.
Sure.
And so I've sat there before when we're at the closing table and a name was not 100% correct, and everybody, and so the idea of redrawing all of oh my goodness gracious. So the idea that could have been taken care of at the beginning by someone simply texting into our system or letting us know based on a correspondence with something like Alanna that, hey, that's not quite right. That would have saved some heartache. I think the last thing that's kind of interesting about this piece is, we're all striving for 5-star service. I talk about reviews all the time. It's the future currency of your business. I totally believe that. You search for something, someplace has 3 reviews, 10 reviews, and 200 reviews, the decision has already been made. And so it's the same in the title space. We need to remember that customer experience is a huge, huge part of whether or not we get that 5-star review, that actual experience. So by streamlining their experience, we think of it as the escrow officer or closer, man, I get all of these messages all the time and I got to figure out a way to respond. We don't think of it as our customers would prefer to have a different way where they don't have to pick up the phone and call us, or they don't have to email us asking for something either. So the idea that they could reach out, connect with something like Alanna that's engaged right in the system, get an answer instantly within moments. We've now improved their experience too. And they may think of those things at 9 o'clock at night.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. And so what we're seeing the biggest movement toward is that the consumer experience that they're having in their everyday life, whether they're texting their kids, their grandkids, or their grandkids are texting them, and I don't care where you're at in the country, if you're 80 years old, you're using text, or if you're 8 years old, you're using text, and that generation, it's younger and younger kids, in my opinion, are getting cell phones, and that it's just a way of communicating. Well, this whole experience from their parents and even grandparents are now being pressed upon businesses. And these businesses, you have that, you use the Amazon experience. I mean, I'm telling you that businesses today are getting pressure to give service like Amazon, UPS, FedEx, you name it, they want information immediately, and they want technology to be able to help them get to that. And I can't tell you how many people don't even have laptops. It's an iPad and a cell phone, and that's their life. So
that leads perfectly to myth number 3. So my dentist may be scheduling my appointment via text. I got a new driver in the mail. You talked about golf. You're out there doing endurance and like all these things, and I am playing golf. I got a new driver the other day. FedEx is texting me, telling me the latest. So I'm using that. But I think myth number 3 is a lot of people think, at least in this title space, like not only are we not going to utilize texting, but our clients aren't going to utilize texting. So what do you have to say when it comes to implementing kind of a text communication with our clients and customers in the title space?
Yeah, we started out talking about how the title industry is, a century plus old, and some of the processes may feel like they're a century plus old, depending on what part of the country you're in. And so the thing is that we have this rolling technology expectation that continues to roll along. And so, that, like I said, I think today, you're working with young realtors. They're working off their phone. They're expecting text. They don't want to talk to people. They don't want to log into a portal. They don't want to do all the things that we've provided them in the past. They want text. They want, that information. They don't want to know passwords. There's and that's something that we feel is a way to help in that communication channel. So again, coming back to our consumer experience, the dentist, the doctor, whoever is giving you these notifications are great. That keeps everybody informed in the process. But what we like to say is there's more to it. That's like the first step, is to notify, reply back and see what happens. And that's what I love to do it, whether it be, at a hotel, somebody says, "Hey, hope your check-in went well." And I'm like, "Thanks, I got a question." And it's like crickets. It's no different than a phone call or an email. So it's like, we want that elevated experience, and the elevated experience is to not only say, "Hey, here's information about your closing, here's the next step." And one thing that we always encourage is these conversations. It's like, if you want to know what the next step is, ask me anytime type thing. And that concept of, let's have a two-way and not just use this as another email type thing or voicemail type thing. So, let's go to the next level.
Right. So notifications are one thing, but that's exactly right. And half of them will literally say, like, "Do not reply to this."
Yeah.
It's literally saying, like, "Here's what you need to know, but don't ask a question because we can't answer it." You're going to have to pick up the phone, press 1 7 times, and ask for a representative really loudly. So for people that aren't familiar, when it comes to Alanna AI, can you paint the picture of what it looks like, the text interface? I'm a client or a customer. My transaction has opened with the Hoyt Mann title company, and I get a text message inviting me into this conversation. And what happens from there?
Yeah, it's the text message is a welcome text message, and a lot of our customers like to create their own caricatures, and so they have these different stories, background stories behind these characters. But anyhow, they're introducing their company. They're trying to create an experience, and they basically are interacting with that. And basically with that, in that transaction, they're interacting with them with, "Hey, your file's opened. If you want to know what the next step is, reply what's next," and actually list out what all the steps are. And then if they ask another question, and we have 200 plus different types of scenarios. I don't want to call them questions, because when you're in the AI world, it's not static. It's not click this, and if they have there's no clicking. It's all very free form. And that's the beauty of AI. And there's more. I would say there's probably about 30% of conversations you can tell the person doesn't realize they're interacting with a non-human. And even though the introduction says that, but the point is that's our goal, is to interact, give information immediately, and make it to where the person feels like they're interacting with somebody who's helping them and cares to give them their answers, or even responds to their concerns. And there's plenty of F-bombs being dropped here and there for different reasons. And the AI is programmed to de-escalate and to give some assurances and pass the information to the right parties, just like you would expect any employee to do.
So two things there. One is, when it comes to actually getting a message across, text is obviously the way to go. 97% open response rates within a minute, so like, obviously that's the way we should be going if we have an important message to get across. But then the second thing is, as a nerd, I'd be curious to know, how many data points, or whatever you call them in the AI world, did you start with when you launched Alanna, and how many are you at now, as far as her continuing to learn what somebody means when they say, like, "What do I owe?" or the question might be.
Sam, it's tens of thousands of branches of logic components that have been, I call it the Alanna brain. And there's one brain that satisfies all of our customers in understanding the language. So think of one type of resource that has all this information and has the ability to, and all of our customers log into their production systems and get information, deliver documents, all the things that a human would actually do. So it started out with about 20 different, and so the Alanna baby brain could only handle about 25 different questions, kind of like our dogs, right? They sit, they can, they can do a few things, shake and things like that. Well, Alanna's brain grew to do a little bit more. And now we're into, because every day the AI is being trained, because it's just like an employee. Hey, if you're a manager and you're listening to an employee's conversation, you're like, you know what? That wasn't quite right. let's retrain. And that's what we do daily with Alanna, is we look at those conversations, make sure she's getting it right. And those getting it right percentages has been 90 plus, 95 plus. We're into probably 96%. And in the AI world, those levels are pretty much as high as you get to. Once you get past that 96, 97, you're into kind of this kind of infinite work to be able to get it 100% right, because none of us get it 100% right, even as humans.
Just out of curiosity, do you have any idea like what human accuracy is versus AI accuracy? Like, can we quantify that? Because I can't imagine that a human, I mean, if we're 90% accurate, we're probably doing pretty well, right? Like, so 97, 96, 97, that's like a whole nother.
It's phenomenal. It's really great stuff to be able to get to those levels of accuracy. And you're right. When you look at, there's studies done, IBM has got a lot of great information out there that talks about how often humans are getting it right versus how often AI is getting it right. And those differences, the interesting part is AI gets it right more times, but here's the catch. Us as humans don't give AI the same level of grace and guidance and leniency as we would another human. So we're more mad when the computer gets it wrong than we are a fellow worker gets it wrong.
we know we're flawed. We know we're not. So one last thing about that texting interaction, the conversational AI, right? If people have heard that conversational, again, people not even knowing whether or not they're communicating with their escrow officer or escrow assistant or robot, right? When it comes to a question that cannot be facilitated or answered by AI, does it tag back in like I'm an escrow officer, I get a notification and I can respond, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Just think about it just like you would an assistant. If they can't answer the question, like, I'm going to have to take a note, pass it on to somebody who can, and they can get back in touch with you. And so it's doing all the things you would want, again, your human assistant to do. It's interesting. We've had to struggle with this a little bit because we call this a virtual assistant. And, in the world, there's actually companies that provide humans as virtual assistants that just are outsourced someplace else, and they do these activities. But the funny thing is that the activities that both do, virtual assistant human or virtual assistant AI, are really the same things. So, and again, I think that I like to say that the AI that we provide that for the title industry is the AI that is specialized, is trained, and it's meant to do the job.
Yeah. So that kind of leads to the last myth in my mind, which is this idea that, so if anybody in this call has ever attempted to change production software, I went down that road at one point, and like, my goodness gracious, like the idea of change and retraining and implementation was very overwhelming for everybody, especially the people that have been using this, whatever it was, SoftPro, RamQuest, Wesware, whatever it might have been. So the idea of implementing something, some people are going to say, hey, my staff is already too busy. Like, I don't know that we can deal with this right now. So how do you combat that when somebody says, hey, I don't have time to do this right now?
Yeah. And it comes back down to, there's part of me that says, if you don't, you have to make time to do this, because automation is key to business in longevity and success. So, that concept of sharpening the saw, to get better at, chopping that wood, is kind of where I feel like that the industry is coming to now, which is, those volumes are decreasing a little bit. Everybody's taking a deep breath and they're like, okay, and there might have been some changes in the organization. And so with those changes, you want to make sure that, whether it be, not as many staff to handle it or things of that nature, you want to be making sure to implement those processes and invest in the things that are going to basically give you returns in the future. And so when people talk about spending, I don't have time to spend on this. It's like, well, think about it in a little different way. Think about investing time in the future return on that investment, which is really what we talk about day in and day out. So that's one thing I talk about, is making sure to invest in bettering your title company and those processes. But the other thing is that there is a misconception, and it depends on organizations, but the technology is designed not to give you another channel of customer support to have to deal with. It's to actually make it to where you can provide that support without adding people to your company. So if I was to present a technology to you and, oh, by the way, you need more people to support this technology, that's not a great solution. What we're providing is technology to actually, in essence, replace some of the activities that current staff is doing that are lower, more repetitive type activities, and get people off the phone and get people, doing the things that they want to do, which is, working on title.
Yeah, let the humans do the human things and let the robots do the robot things. And it seems to me that, as we move into this, a little bit of uncertainty right now, let's be honest, right? Like the market is in a strange place, but we're moving ahead and we're going to get through it like we always have. But it might be a better time than ever, because at the end of the day, this is working 24 hours, 7 days a week for me, and doesn't take days off and doesn't have, dental or health. And so it's this idea that if you can implement something now, try it now, that could carry us through this. It seems like a real opportunity. So this is not a myth. This is kind of like a last thing. And I hate to put you on the spot this way, but it sounds expensive, right? So I think one more kind of thing would be, if I'm a title agency owner and I'm watching this right now and I'm thinking, wow, this sounds awesome, I'd love to have this conversation and see what this looks like for my business. Is it something that is going to be attainable for me, or is this something that is through the roof expensive?
No, when you think about it holistically, it's very affordable in that if you think about, if you actually start to do, if you get your accountant hat on and you start breaking down numbers, and it's like, okay, I get X amount of calls a day. And if I really put some numbers to that, I go, okay, my people are spending this much time on calls, or this much time in voicemail, and this much time in email, responding to these different elements. You really add that up. That's a lot. It is really a lot. And then again, there's some other elements that are not as easily quantitatable, type thing, to where it's like, again, we came back to customer service. If that person interacting as a customer service, interaction is frustrated because all the work they currently have to do and they're so busy, that level of service is different than somebody who's fresh and like, yeah, I'm going to talk to you for as long as you want to talk, and really kind of continue to build that rapport. So to me, again, it's affordable in a way that it really surprises people. And so we've had a customer that they called up the other day and they said, "Hey, just curious," and this was a high level executive. They said, "Can you tell us how many conversations that Alanna's handled in the last month?" And we went and we pulled it up and we said, looks like about 1,500 conversations in the past month. And some of those were simultaneous, upwards of 4 and 5, maybe 6 conversations at one time. And with that level of savings, they were like, we had no idea that Alanna was doing that much more, but we knew we were having more free time. And so we really wanted to dig into what that looked like. And it's pretty fantastic when you're actually, it's almost like science fiction. You think, wait, I'm able to conduct all the business I'm doing with less lift and still increase my customer satisfaction. So
I'm blown away by where we are and where we're going. And as we wrap up, I just want to thank you for your time, and you guys are doing some incredible things down there, and I'm excited to be kind of along for the ride watching it. I'm going to send some follow-up to everybody here, and I'm going to include your contact info and a little bit of information about Alanna But is there anything you want to leave with people kind of as one last little thing to think about as a takeaway as we close the conversation on AI for title?
Yeah, I'd say, curiosity, one side of things is that if you're curious about it, let us know. This industry continues to evolve, and we're happy to do anything we can to help just from an advisor perspective. It might not be the AI that we do. We're doing more customer service type AI and some other things, but we're always happy to talk with the industry. We want to invest in our industry in any way we can. So I'd say if you're curious, get in touch with us. We'd have to be a resource for you. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about the conversational AI utility that we offer, let me know.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like to me, I mean, especially again, as we're moving into this new space right now, if we can, improve operational efficiencies, streamline our own processes, create a better customer experience, and take a little bit of weight off of the shoulders of some of our people, it sounds like we're checking a lot of boxes. So thanks for hanging out for a few minutes today, Hoyt. I really appreciate it. I'll send your contact info as a follow-up. I invite everybody. Hoyt has a real rising tide mentality, the same that I do. A rising tide raises all ships. We are all in this together. No matter what the market holds for us, I think the best is yet to come. So thanks for hanging out for a few minutes, and we'll see you soon, Hoyt.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Keep an eye out for the follow-ups. And if you need anything, reach out to your MTD team through your sales rep, or reach out to Hoyt and his team, and we're all here to help. Everybody have a great day. Thanks.
All right.